the Roots of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Root of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E. If you are new here, welcome. It's always such a pleasure to have you on. And for the regulars, thank you so much for coming back and listening for more. The usual reminder that you can follow this podcast on your favorite podcast streaming platform. It can be YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google, or Spotify, and make sure that you click on notify so that when a new podcast comes on, you are well aware. And we are also on the various social media platforms. We are on Twitter at the Root of the Sci Pod, as well as Instagram. You can also find us on Facebook and LinkedIn using the Root of the Science podcast handle. I'm pleased to announce a new series called Gates Stories. The series is centered around the Gates Foundation's initiatives and aims to showcase interviews with African experts in STEM who are actively involved in developing solutions related to these themes. Spanning from July to October, the series will cover a range of topics. For example, this July will focus on agricultural productivity and climate change. Further, we'll explore additional themes such as maternal health, gender equality, HIV and TB, as well as technology. Some months may feature a single theme, while other months might overlap with multiple themes. We're excited to host inspiring guests who engage in conversations that delve into their work and provide valuable insights on these topics. This month's focus, like I've already mentioned, is on agricultural productivity and climate change. Studies have shown that agriculture sector contributes significantly more to poverty reduction compared to other sectors. However, this vital sector faces immense challenges due to intensifying weather patterns caused by climate change. In Africa, change in weather patterns pose a significant challenge to staple crop production. This poses a threat to food security as well as nutrition, considering that millions of people depend on livestock-derived foods, which are also affected by outdoor farming challenges. To combat these obstacles, African scientists are actively searching for solutions to mitigate the impacts of climate change on agriculture. But how can they achieve this? Who is leading the charge to implement these solutions? And what practical measures are being taken? In this episode, we embark on a journey to explore the innovative strategies being developed by African scientists to overcome these challenges. Let's go. Today, we're speaking to Professor Tafadzwanashe Mabhaudhi, an honorary associate professor at the University of KwaZulu-Natal and the director for the Center for Transformative Agriculture and Food Systems. As an expert in agriculture research and solutions, he joins us today to shed light on the current state of agriculture in South Africa, the impact of climate change on agricultural production, and the potential solutions to address these challenges. Prof, welcome to the show. It is so lovely to have you on.
Thank you very much, Anne, and thank you for having me on the show.
So to get straight into it, Prof, could you first paint us a picture? What is the current overview on the state of agriculture, particularly in South Africa, in terms of production?
Well, agriculture is broad. You've got various sectors. You've got your livestock, you've got your crop side, you've got the aquaculture, the fisheries, the forestry sector. All of those, they fall under agriculture. But broadly speaking, we are coming from a high. The last 3 seasons were La Nina seasons, so we're receiving, above average rainfall in most parts of South Africa, and the harvests were quite excellent. So we are coming off a very good, almost 3 years in terms of production and productivity in the agricultural space. Of course, it's not without challenge, because recently we've seen the food price increases associated with the Ukraine-Russia conflict
Mm-hmm.
and the impact that has had on global supply chains for fertilizer and oil, wheat, and so forth, where Africa is highly dependent on those. So those have also impacted, but I think to an extent that has been buffered by the fact that we've had very good productivity years.
Wow, that's quite interesting.
It's a natural weather phenomenon. We've got the ENSO, where we've got La Nina and El Nino, which are cyclical. So those have always been happening. So what was perhaps unique was we came out of 3 successive La Ninas. So that doesn't happen quite often, to have 3 successive La Ninas. So we had 3 successive La Ninas. So that gave us like 3 successive very good seasons, that we came out of. This year, we're actually now switching into the opposite of La Nina. So La Nina gives, above average rainfall, and of course, it also brings intense rainfall, which is why we had, flooding and those sort of things. The opposite of it, which is what we're entering into, is El Nino, which is associated with higher temperatures and often drought.
Oh, okay. These are natural effects that are currently happening, and these are the things that are cyclic. So, in the context of climate change, where does that fit in? How does that impact agricultural production then? That's obviously the buzzword that everybody is speaking about. The climates are changing, temperatures are rising, rainfall is depleting, or it might be increasing in other areas. So what impact does that have in terms of the general agriculture production?
So what climate change is doing, it's not so much as creating new weather, but in many cases, it's intensifying things. So, for example, we know that this coming season, it's El Nino. El Nino is always associated with very warm or very high temperatures. And, in where we are in Southern Africa, it brings with it dry, below average rainfall. In other parts, it's actually wetter, like in Ethiopia. El Nino brings with it above average rainfall. But where we are, we expect it to be drier during El Nino. So what climate change can then impact is the intensity of the heat, that we expect that it will be now warmer than what would have been average and drier than what would have been average. So it's just the intensity of things, that is being impacted. And in certain cases, when those intensify, it has some spatial implications, which mean that certain areas are becoming warmer than they used to be. And that has implications for agriculture, because it might mean that certain pests and diseases that traditionally were not crossing certain, agroecological zones will now be able to thrive in certain areas, which brings added costs for the farmer in terms of controlling those pests and diseases. Or it might make production of certain crops challenging. In some instances, you might have shifts in terms of areas that are suitable for production of certain crops. And that has implications in terms of the whole value chain. So, for example, you take like sugarcane. If sugarcane suitability was to shift inland a bit, and you've got most of the mills on the coast, along the coast, that suddenly increases the distance between the farm and the mill. So all of those things have implications in the broader scheme of things.
I'm also learning something new. When I think most people, they think of climate change, they think something new, but I like how you said that it's just an intensity of the weather. And with what you said about the spatial implications, you do a lot of research and work in something called systems thinking, and this is an approach which you advocate to sort of solve some of these agricultural production issues that could be a result of climate change, or just as a result of climate change or climate change intensities. So for somebody who doesn't know and who's listening, could you explain to us what systems thinking actually is, and what does this approach actually entail?
Okay, thanks. So to put it simple, systems thinking is just the understanding of the interconnected nature of things, that things are linked in space and time, and also the understanding of causality and trade-offs and synergies. So if things are linked and they're interconnected, therefore means that they tend to influence each other, either positively or negatively. So what is done in one space can have impacts in another place. So that is the systemic nature of things. So for example, something can be done within the agricultural space, which we think is a good idea. We can say, okay, let's open up new land, let's get farmers planting, let's start gardens and so forth. But then if we are not careful, it might mean that we then open up new land where traditionally it was used for grazing. So now we are informing land use change. We are reducing grasslands, converting grassland into arable land, agricultural land. And at a system level, what that would mean is we are reducing the area available for generating runoff, which we need to recharge our rivers, our water system. And we're also increasing the area where you can generate erosion, because now you don't have covered surfaces. So now you're going to have erosion. It's going to carry soil into your river system. You're going to have siltation. And so something that was good in terms of thinking, but because it lacked a consideration of other systems, of the interconnectedness between agriculture, the environment, and our water, and the fact that that water that is next to your garden is not stagnant, it's moving. So there are upstream and downstream effects in terms of what you're doing in the upstream and what you're doing, and how it impacts someone who has not done anything at all, but who just happens to be further down the river. So understanding that interconnectedness of the different systems and how they influence each other positively and negatively and across different scales and different times is what then helps us to plan in a more holistic manner, because now you've got a broader view and broader perspective. You can mitigate or reduce the negative unintended consequences that usually happen when you don't have that broad perspective. And you can also maximize things that are synergistic, things that set in motion beneficial changes. So you can then target those and say, let us optimize these things because they are catalytic and can multiply or enhance benefits across a wider scale.
Interesting. So the way that I've understood it is basically it's basically us not working in a silo to solve particular solutions, but rather working together. So I'm assuming this means as scientists or agriculture people, you are working with policies, you are working with industry, you are working with so many other people to solve a problem which might have just been identified, for example, in agriculture. But when you take a deeper look, you see that it actually has got all of these ripple effects.
Correct. So it brings us to what people are now calling transdisciplinary research, or some frame it as the science policy practice interface. But putting it plainly just means working with a broad range of actors whom you would not normally interact with. So it would mean myself as a researcher, I have to work with farmers because they're the people who own the land and are making these decisions. I have to work with government because they're in the business of regulating what happens in terms of policy. I have to work with extension workers because they advise farmers. I have to work with NGOs that that support farmers on the ground. So you're working with a broad range of actors, and in doing so, you're not just working with them from the beginning. From some point, you start together in understanding the issues together because we understand things differently. So you want to bring in those multiple perspectives of how do we understand things, then move towards a shared understanding, then move towards now co-developing or co-designing the solutions. Then you implement the solutions together, assess together, and you move towards the answer together. So there's a whole lot of engagement in the process, which adds for complexity.
Yeah,
I think it's worth the value.
Just to touch on that complexity, I was about to get to it because it sounds really great on paper that we are working together and this idea, but we are humans, right? And you being a researcher, working with a farmer, working with a policy, there's a broad range of opinions on how to do things, when to do things, etc. So it's very complex. So in your experience, what are some of those challenges that you have experienced in working in this manner to solve, really key, important issues?
Yeah, you raise an important point. So we are trained differently. Even you and I, we are trained differently. We look at the world through different lenses, and we understand things differently. We also speak different languages. So, for framing the same problem, we would frame it using different words depending on your area of specialization. And if we were to stand in the same place, I would probably figure out things that are on the biophysical side. You could figure out things that are social, that are not right in that space. Someone could look at the economic things and so forth. Someone could see the infrastructure and what so forth. And what you have to understand at the end of the day is we are all right in our way. So no one is wrong. We are all right in our way. And I think that's the first point of it. Understanding and respecting that, we could all be right. We just see things differently. And within having those multiple perspectives, you also have competing agendas because we want to achieve different objectives. If I'm a farmer, I want to increase my productivity, grow more, harvest more, make more money. If I'm in the environmental space, I want to protect the environment. So I'm thinking, don't go there, don't touch that, So we've got different and often competing agendas. But if you move past, the different language, the different viewpoints, the competing agendas, and you look at the vision, ultimately we are all trying to achieve similar goals. And that all of us, in most instances, we are trying to advance the betterment of society. We are trying to, develop society, either socially, economically, and sustainably. We're just coming at it from different ways. That's why I was saying that it becomes important to build a shared vision. Because if you can build that shared vision, that becomes the rallying point to say, this is where we all converge. Let's say, for example, South Africa, is saying we want to achieve a better life for all.
Yes.
So everyone is working towards that better life for all, coming from different directions. And sometimes we become so focused in what we are doing, our own work, and what we need to achieve, that we don't look up to at the vision, and then look around to say who else is looking up at the same vision. So it's building that sort of consensus. It takes a lot of work, really, to build that consensus. It takes establishing communities of practice. There are huge transactional costs in terms of the amount of time you need to invest building relationships with people, building trust with people,
Mm.
and then moving forward together.
Mm. Mm. You're absolutely right that I'm sure it's not something that just happens today when you sit in a boardroom and discuss these solutions. So with that being said, I'd love to hear some of the potential success stories that you've been up to so that people can be aware of these projects that are currently underway. Because maybe for some people, this idea of thinking, of solving solutions in this manner is something that they've heard for the first time. So in your work, what are some of the success stories or maybe projects that are still in the path of being a success story that you could share to the viewers that maybe they can look into and see the work that you've been doing?
Okay, so we've been working on various projects, but a lot of my work now falls under the water energy food nexus. And the water energy food nexus is just an approach that seeks to build the understanding behind the interlinkages or the interconnectedness of water, energy, and food systems, and the understanding of trade-offs and synergies in terms of how water needs energy, energy needs water, food production needs water and energy, and those sort of things, and how we balance those in time and space. So we've had some successes in that space in terms of the partnerships that we've been able to build. We've been working on it since around 2013 or so, when we started working with the Water Research Commission, Global Water Partnership, Southern Africa, the International Water Management Institute, IMI, and like the South African Weather Service, Department of Water and Sanitation, and many other organizations at different levels that have come in. We've even partnered internationally with like IHE Delft, and at one point we partnered with Future Earth. So we've managed over time to build a very broad-based community of practice, and we are now starting to see a lot of results. For example, we are now running successfully a capacity development program. We run an online masterclass that is offered over 3 days online. We've got an in-person advanced school that is offered over 5 days and gives really hands-on tools around understanding systems, how to quantify trade-offs in systems, how to model some of these things, and how to apply them in real-life settings. And this year was our most successful year because the online course attracted about 180 participants from across the globe, like all major regions of the world. We are going to have the advanced school in Southern Africa and in the Middle East and North Africa, in Jordan. We have received huge, requests from West Africa and Central Asia to replicate the model. So in many ways, that has been a success. Other areas of success have been around the work on climate change adaptation, where we partnered with the South African National Biodiversity Institute, Umgugundlovu District Municipality, and other different arms of state in delivering a very integrated and comprehensive program of interventions that straddled things such as early warning systems, interventions in the built and ecological infrastructure, climate resilient agriculture, and then working across those to build capacities and mainstream the lessons into policy. And we just had a very successful climate change interval a few weeks back in June, where again the representation reflected those groupings from the different walks of life. But all of those have taken time. They've been more than 5 years invested in those partnerships to yield the successes that we talk about now.
Wow, that's amazing. It's amazing how how far the reach has become. And also, I think that other people across the world are seeing the need in terms of approaching, using this approach. And the reason is because they can see the success. And just thinking about that, you started in 2013 implementing these projects. I'm sure you never expected that you would reach, or maybe you did, let me not assume, but I mean, in terms of the impact that you have, that's in just about 10 years. That's really, really impressive work that you have been a part of, and the various teams. So congratulations on that. It's something really we as Africans can be proud that we are steering this type of thinking and this type of approach to solve problems that we are facing right here in our continent.
Thank you very much. It's pretty much been a lot of teamwork, a lot of big dreams, and a lot of students like yourselves who come into these spaces and do excellent work with the communities, engage with a different range of actors, and generate the evidence that allows us to then go and convince people in different spaces to say, this works, we are doing it, or we have done it. So it's been the efforts of a lot of people. Some are still there. Some as students come and go when they get their qualifications. So one would want to appreciate all of those people who've really contributed to these successes.
Definitely. And I wish you and your various teams all the best, because this is really, really important work. And I'm sure this is only the beginning. And 20 years from now, we're going to see even more results of this really amazing work that you are doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and fantastic spending time with you.
Yes.
I'm a huge fan of the work that you're doing. Please carry on.
Oh, thank you. Before you go, one last question. I've really appreciated your insights and everything that you shared, but I think it would be remiss of me to not ask some words of wisdom from somebody who, is listening to your story and is inspired by you. I'm sure many people are, like myself. Could you impart some wisdom to the audience, drawing from your own your own personal journey on how you got here as an African in STEM and the amazing work that you do, and also maybe in terms of the impact of the work that you do? Just a few words would really be appreciated.
Okay. Well, you've put me on the spot. But I'll just say that, as an African, we always say it takes a village to raise a child. So it takes a village to bring about success, whether that success is then identified or translated through an individual, but there's a village behind. But on the other side, when we say it takes a village to raise a child, then the child has to be in the village to be raised. So in often cases, you need to position yourself in that village, and the village being working with people and a community around you that is supportive, that understands your roots, your background, your aspirations, your dreams, and they work to support you in that regard. So we need to invest time in building not just partnerships at a professional level, but partnerships at a personal level with people that can contribute into our lives positively. A lot of the things that have worked well in my life and so forth have come through the people that were around me, just through conversation, through suggestions, sometimes through a nudge in the right direction. But you have to be present. You have to participate in the process. And the other thing that I would say one needs to have is just being true to oneself. No one can ever be better than you if you are just being yourself, because we are each unique. But if you try to be something else that we are not, life can be very difficult, because we are not being true to ourselves. But if we stay true to ourselves, and we follow our passions. It might take time. It might be hard. It might be slow. But my thinking is eventually you find success more easily and more satisfactorily if you do and you stay true to who you are and what strengths you already have naturally.
Wow. Thank you. That's really good insight and really good wisdom. And I hope that somebody uses this to think differently. And I love what you said about community, not only professionally, but also personally. It really goes a long way. The saying is your network is your net worth. And I am a firm believer of that. Thank you once again. And to everybody else who's tuned in, thank you so much for tuning into another episode of the Root of the Science podcast with your girl, and with an E. Until next time, goodbye.